Just when I was about to swing myself up into Ambrose's saddle, a rider on another camel shot past me. I only saw him in a blur, but there was no mistaking the black color. All the other men wore the white burnous, and there was no mistaking his voice, either. After them, follow me, men. Cold, hard, commanding. I pulled myself the rest of the way up into the saddle and urged Ambrose up and forward. It took me only moments to catch up to Mr. Ambrose. When he glanced sideways at me, his face was still a kind of blur, constantly jerking around with the strange gait of the camel beneath him, but the ice in his eyes was clear enough. I said follow me, men. In case I wasn't clear enough, that didn't include you. My eyes narrowed. What do you want me to do? Stay back there. I jerked my hand at the empty desert behind us. Yes, right by that big rock. He waved dismissively at a sandstone formation. We'll come back when the bandits are dead. Blimey, he was actually serious. Go to hell. The road to hell, I'm told, is paved with good intentions. 28, he gave his camel a kick, urging the animal to go faster. So it's very unlikely I'll ever find my way there. Picking up the speed with a protesting bleat, his camel shot forward. I urged Ambrose on to catch up again. Why didn't you tell me we had reinforcements? You could have let me know. Knowledge is power, is time is money. So what? He gave me a look that clearly said he thought me very daft. Meaning that if I shared knowledge, that would be tantamount to sharing power or money. Which you aren't willing to do. Naturally, especially not with you. My mouth dropped open. I hate you. Indeed, raising his gun, he fired a shot at the closest bandit. More shots sounded from right and left. Without my noticing, the rest of our party, and reinforcements, had caught up. Somewhere I saw Yusef's proud figure, then I spotted Cream's turban, towering over the heads of the others. Oh, how many others? The masses of men and camels around us seemed endless, streaming down the hills from three sides, hot on the bandit's trail. I caught the eye of a bandit, looking around to see how close we were. His face paled, and a grin spread over mine. Grim satisfaction rose up in me, dispelling my anger for the moment. We're going to flatten those bastards, aren't we? A slightly informal way of putting it, but, on the whole, you were correct. Another volley of gunfire went off, and several bandits dropped to the ground. Yes, not having a gun or a saber, I thrust my fist into the air. Yes, get the bloody bastards. The men behind me gave a cheer, and the next volley went off, felling another 6 or 7 bandits. The remaining bandits pulled out canes and began to beat their camels furiously, forcing them to go even faster. Don't lose sight of them. Mr. Ambrose shouted a command. We have to know where they're going. Don't worry, Effendi, Yusef shouted back. Those are no racing camels. They cannot keep up that speed for long. And he was right. After only a few minutes, some of the bandits' camels began to falter and stumble. They slowed and slowed, no matter how many blows their masters inflicted on their rumps. A cheer went up from our men. Get them. Cries rose up. Get them all. Rifles were raised, and another volley of gunfire thundered over the noise of the running camels. We were so close now, almost a dozen bandits fell to the ground, stricken. Out of all of them, only 6 were left now. Get them. One of the men behind me shouted again. Get them all. Fire. Mr. Ambrose opened his mouth. No, don't. His voice was cut off by the gunfire. 5 bandits dropped to the ground, dead. A last shot sounded, and the very last bandit slid out of the saddle, hitting the ground with a thump. His camel continued for a few more paces, then slowly came to a halt and sank to its knees, exhausted. The men cheered. Gunshots were fired into the air. More cheers rose up, and more until someone noticed the expression on Mr. Ambrose's face. Well, if I was being honest, it wasn't an expression, exactly. It rather was what you would get if you deep froze an expression and sprinkled it with promises of wrath and violence. Slowly, the gunshot stopped and the cheers subsided. When everyone, including me, Cream and the camels, was absolutely silent and cowering under the glare of our employer, Mr. Ambrose asked in a very cool, controlled voice, who fired that shot? The men looked at each other, dumbfounded. Then one raised his hand. Effendi, what shot? The last one, the one that killed the last bandit. Oh, the hand sank down again, apparently profoundly grateful it wasn't attached to the guilty party. A few moments of deadly silence hung over the desert. Unbearably hot as it was, the desert air seemed suddenly ready to freeze. Finally, another hand, slightly trembling, rose from among the men. They parted like a bunch of chickens that had discovered a warthog in chicken costume among their number. The man was of slightly less than average height, not dark-skinned enough to be an Arab, French or Spanish, maybe, with a straight, rather short nose, and curly black hair that peeked out from under his headdress. At the moment, sweat was also trickling out from under there, down his forehead. Mr. Ambrose advanced towards him. His camel was slightly bigger than the other man's, not to speak of himself. He towered over the man in the burnous. Tell me, Mr. Ambrose asked, his voice deceptively low and smooth, what exactly were my orders? 2. Get them all the bandits, sir. No, if you think back closely, you will remember that was what you men shouted. I want to know what my orders were. Oh, well, sir, since you are having difficulties with your memory, I'll tell you. My orders were, verbatim, don't lose sight of them. We have to know where they're going. For a moment, heavy silence descended over the landscape again. Then, Mr. Ambrose leaned forward until only a few inches separated his cold, hard face from that of his employee. Tell me, how exactly are we going to, not lose sight of them? How are we going to find out where they're going, when they're all dead? Well, do not be shy. I would be most interested to hear your opinion. Well, I don't know, sir. Shooting up, Mr. Ambrose's fist clamped around the smaller man's throat and lifted him clean off the saddle. He dangled in the air, a few inches above the leather, fighting for breath. Neither do I, Mr. Ambrose hissed. Congratulations, I have crossed 2 oceans, survived explosions, assassins in the desert. Not one of those things has been able to stop me from getting my revenge. And you have succeeded where all those things failed. Just a stupid little man who can follow orders. What do you have to say for yourself? Grrk, crack, rrrm. It seemed to me that with Mr. Ambrose's hand clamped around his throat, the man didn't have much to say for himself, nor was it likely he would ever speak again if Mr. Ambrose didn't let go. My dear employer didn't appear to have noticed that fact, though. I cleared my throat. He didn't notice that, either. He was far too focused on the object of his ice-cold rage. Do you realize we will never find the rest of them, now? He demanded, his voice like shards of ice piercing the skin. The rest of them. The words were out of my mouth before I knew it. He turned just slightly to look at me. You think there are more bandits than the ones we killed, sir? Of course. The number of attacks on my caravans and the size of the raiding parties leave no other possibility. This was just one of 3 or 4 groups. The rest of them are still safe back in the bandits' hideout, wherever that is. And thanks to this gentleman, he shook his victim like a ragdoll, eliciting more gagging noises. We will never find its location. Eyes glittering icily, Mr. Ambrose glared up at the man. I wonder what would be a fitting punishment for you. RRG, MMNNMH. Silence, you have lost the right to speak. NHHRMMGK. Silence, I said, you will be sacked, of course. Maybe I should abandon you here, or maybe I'll drag you before a magistrate, and have you held responsible for ruining this expedition. You can work off the cost in the next 30 years in some dusty coal mine. How would you like that? NNNMM. The man's face was turning blue now. I looked away, not particularly charmed by the sight. My eyes happened to stray into the direction where the camels of the bandits had stopped to rest. They were no longer there. Frowning, I looked around and spotted them a few dozen yards away. They weren't resting anymore. True, they were moving slowly, but they were moving, and what's more, they all seemed to be headed in more or less the same general direction. Or a quarry. I heard Mr. Ambrose from behind me. How would you like to slave in a quarry for the rest of your life? NMM, PLLSSS. I cleared my throat again. Rick. Don't interrupt. He snapped at me without looking. Then he returned to his prey. No, a quarry is too good for you. You might actually get to breathe fresh air. No, I'll put you in a match factory, where you will breath poisonous sulfur fumes until your lungs give up and... The camels were moving away faster now. Rick, I really think you should. I said don't interrupt. They were definitely moving as a group, and they were almost over the first hill already. Almost out of sight. But I really think you should look at this. What is it? Exasperated, Mr. Ambrose turned around. When I pointed, he followed my outstretched arm with his gaze. Yes, a few camels walking over a hill. So what? It's obvious, isn't it? We follow them. We don't need the bandits to be alive. Their camels will lead us back to their hideout. This is no time for ridiculous jokes. I'm not joking. Turning his head slightly, Mr. Ambrose pierced me with his gaze. Let me be clear. You want me to follow a group of beasts that smell like the doormat in front of a sewer entrance and look like the Fury version of the Hunchback of Notre Dame into the desert, without knowing for certain that they are, in fact, heading anywhere specific. Swallowing, I held his gaze. Yes. And this wild idea is based on. Call it female intuition. Mr. Ambrose muttered something too low for me to hear. From the look in his eyes, though, I gathered it was something not very complimentary about female intuition in general and the people who had them in particular. Meanwhile, he was still holding his victim up by the throat. The man's eyes had begun to roll in a rather unhealthy-looking manner. Excuse me, Effendi, but she does actually have a point. Came unexpected help from Yusuf. Camels are herd animals. If there are more bandits as you say, they're sure to have more camels, and they will probably belong to the same herd as these ones. He gestured to the bandits' camels that were almost out of sight by now. A riderless camel's first instinct, apart from spitting you in the eye, is always to find its way back to the herd. GNNK, the man on the end of Mr. Ambrose's arm pleaded, adding his support for the idea. LNNK, RRGG. Mr. Ambrose sat absolutely still for a moment, his eyes flicked between me and the disappearing camels. You really believe this will work, Yusuf? He asked, finally. Yes, Effendi, it certainly cannot hurt to try. All right, Mr. Ambrose opened his hand. Gasping for breath, his victim slammed back into the saddle. We've wasted enough time, let's go, and he drove his camel forward. We didn't have to ride long. After only about half an hour, we reached a broad plain of dirt and sand, stretching out in front of us. At the end of the plain, a rocky cliffside rose up out of the ground, its impenetrable wall broken only by one single gorge, right in the middle. The camels were heading directly towards it. Even from this distance, we heard surprised shouts out of the gorge as the first riderless camel entered. Then, muzzle flashes lit up the shadowy gorge, and the shouts were abruptly replaced by gunfire. We've been seen, Kareem roared. Men, weapons out. What? I thought they already had their weapons out. Everyone had a rifle in his hand. But, at Kareem's order, they threw open their saddlebags and removed other objects that looked far more sinister. Some round, some cylindrical, but far too large for an ordinary rifle. All were made of dark, shiny metal, the look of which sent a shiver down my back. A shiver of excitement. The gunshots in the distance had ceased. I guess whoever had shot had realized by now that we were still out of range. But, to judge by the look on Mr. Ambrose's face, that would soon change. We were going into battle, and I didn't intend to sit back idly. Give me that, I told one of the men who had exchanged his rifle for a new weapon, pointing to the rifle. After all, he didn't need it anymore, did he? The man hesitated, his eyes flitting to Mr. Ambrose. Absolutely not, my dear employer snapped. Have you lost your mind? No, it's still in my head, just as usual. You don't even know how to shoot. It's never too late to learn, is it? Grabbing the rifle, I pulled it from the man's unresisting hands. Where do you put the bullets in? You're insane, Mr. Ambrose hissed. Put them down at once. No. You won't need it anyway. You're staying here, in your dreams. Driving his camel forward, he was suddenly beside me, his hand reaching up. But other than with that poor man earlier, he didn't grab my throat. He grabbed my chin, pulling me towards him. In my dreams, he told me, his voice still as hard and cold as an iceberg, more interesting things happen. Things that involve the two of us. I swallowed, just this once, with his dark, sea-colored eyes boring into mine. I had no words. Stay here, he ordered. I shook my head. Yusuf's camel skidded to halt beside us. Effendi, we have to go. We have already lost the element of surprise. If we delay much longer, they will have reinforcements at the entrance to the gorge, and we won't be able to take it. I felt Mr. Ambrose's fingers clench around my chin almost painfully tightly. A muscle in his jaw twitched. He didn't take his gaze from me, almost not seeming to notice the commands shouted at the distant entrance of the gorge. There's nothing I can do to make you stay, is there? No, I vowed. I'm coming with you. Before I could so much as flinch away, he was on me. His arms came around me, almost lifting me off my saddle, pulling me so tight against him I felt every crease in his tailcoat, every line of his hard body, every grain of sand between us. Our lives collided like two opposing armies, ready to die and love it. Effendi, we have to. I didn't hear the rest of Yusuf's words. My ears were ringing, my body was on fire. Dimly, I wondered whether one of the bullets had hit me. But this felt entirely too sweet for that. When we finally broke apart, I was panting for breath. Mr. Ambrose, of course, was as cold and collected as ever. Well, almost. Stay safe, he ordered, pressing his forehead to mine for just a moment. Then he wheeled his camel around and raised his rifle into the air. Attack. The art of losing your way. It wasn't quite the attack I had imagined. I had expected a brave rush towards the entrance of the gorge, waving our rifles in the air and firing the occasional well-aimed shot at the bandits. Reality was somewhat less heroic. We hunkered down behind a few rocks some distance away from the entrance of the gorge. While bullets were flying over our heads, I watched with increasing puzzlement as several of our men put up 3 of the large cylindrical objects they had brought on tripods. At one end, the objects had a barrel, like a rifle. At the other, something that looked like handles stuck out of it. "What's that?" I demanded, pointing to one of the objects that was sitting a few rocks away from us. "One of my prototypes," Mr. Ambrose answered, curtly. A shot rang out, and I hurriedly snatched my hand back from over the rock, staring at him in disbelief. "We are being shot at by bloodthirsty bandits, and you want to test some new gadget?" "Yes." He gave a signal to one of the men around the cylindrical thingamy, and the fellow grabbed the handle, directing the barrel-shaped protrusion directly at the entrance of the gorge. One final time he looked up, searching for final approval from Mr. Ambrose. Mr. Ambrose nodded. "Fire!" The handle began to turn and the world turned into fire. A roar went up the like of which I had never heard before. It wasn't an explosion. No, it was a never-ending series of explosions, battering the ears with incessant noise. Agonizing noise. I couldn't help uttering a small cry of pain. Then, suddenly hands were covering my ears. Looking up, I gazed in Mr. Ambrose's hard eyes. "It takes some getting used to," he shouted over the record. He didn't seem to be bothered by the ear-splitting roar in the least. My fingers trembling just a little, I pointed at the thing that was spitting bullets faster than lightning. "What kind of hellish machine is that?" "The killing kind." Blimey, was he right about that? 3 of the things had opened fire on the entrance of the gorge now, and shots from there had halved in a few moments. Not that I could hear them over the din of the killing machines. But the muzzle flashes grew fewer and fewer by the second. Only a few more moments, and they ceased completely. Something flashed in the corner of my eye, and my gaze darted to the left, then to the right. From both sides of the cliff, our men were slowly approaching the gorge entrance. They had to have taken a roundabout route to stay out of the line of fire, and were now sneaking up on the enemy without the bandits being any the wiser. If there were bandits left at the gorge entrance at all, that is. The men on either side of the gorge raised their hands in what had to be a signal. Abruptly, the noise of Mr. Ambrose, prototype, cut off, and safe from fire, the men darted into the gorge. A few lone screams rose up into the air, then silence fell. Letting his hands fall from my ears, Mr. Ambrose stood up. "Forwards, men." Some mounted their camels again. Others, whose animals had been hit by one of the enemy's bullets, simply ran forward, ready to hurl themselves on the ground the moment the enemy started firing again. But no shots came. We arrived at the entrance of the gorge, all unhurt and hardly out of breath. We were greeted by cheers from the men who had taken down the first line of bandits. Littered on the ground lay the bodies of the vanquished foes, the red bloodstains contrasting sharply with the white burnouses. "Dismount," Mr. Ambrose called. "The gorge is too narrow for camels. We go on foot from here." He was right. The cleft in the rock was hardly wide enough for one man to walk through, let alone a camel. The bandits had chosen their hideout well. I didn't know much about strategy, but under normal circumstances, this place would probably be as easy to defend as it would be impossible to take. My eyes flitted to the massive prototype guns, and from them to Mr. Ambrose. Circumstances, it seemed, were not normal today. "Yusef, know the desert mountains best." Mr. Ambrose gestured for the Egyptian to squeeze past him. "You take the lead." "Yes, Effendi." Pressed against the stone wall, rifle at the ready, Yusef started to edge down the gorge, Mr. Ambrose right on his heels. "Sahib, wait," Kareem called out. "I should go next, not you. Not this time, Kareem." With a menacing car clack, Mr. Ambrose reloaded his weapon. "I want them myself." And he slid into the shadows of the gorge. Cursing in his native tongue, Kareem dashed after him, and I followed suit. Blast and double blast that man. Does he think he's invincible? Gripping my rifle more tightly, I ran after my dear granite head of an employer, my eyes firmly on his bodyguard's back. I muttered a few more choice curses, but my efforts sounded pitiful next to Kareem's. I really had to make him teach me a few of his homemade curses. They sounded too interesting not to be sprung on London's unsuspecting society. Well, I could try to finagle them out of him if we all got out of here alive. Men pressed forward round me, sliding past me even though I ran at full speed. Whether it was because they had longer legs or were more used to moving in a burnous than I was, I didn't know. But by the time gunfire started up ahead, I was already somewhere at the back of the line. Cursing, I redoubled my efforts to go faster, and was just about to slide past the man in front of me, when I saw something out of the corner of my eye. "Duck." The men didn't react in time, and one of them went down with a bullet in his shoulder. Whirling around, I raised my rifle for a ledge, about 10 feet up the side of the ravine, where a bandit had stepped out of some sort of cave entrance. "Please, God," I prayed. "Please let that thing I'm about to squeeze be the trigger." Bam. Apparently, it was. The barrel in my hand spat fire and smoke, and the bandit twitched back, ducking his head. Then, as he realized my shot had gone wide of the mark, he rose again, grinning, and a volley of bullets from the men behind me caught him full in the chest. "Get up there," I shouted. "Check where that cave leads. How about this, instead?" One of the men pulled something from his pocket. I only saw something round and shiny glint in the sun as it flew towards the cave entrance, then an explosion ripped apart the air, followed by the sound of stone crashing down. When the dust had settled, all that remained of the cave entrance was a pile of rubble. That was spiffing. I grinned at the man who had thrown the explosive. "Can I have one of those?" "Only if you promise me not to blow yourself up." "Done." I lifted my rifle. "And can someone show me how to reload this blasted thing?" We started down the gorge again, more careful this time about watching our backs. No ridges or openings appeared behind or above us, but after only a few minutes, the gorge started to widen, and suddenly we stepped out into a small valley with steep walls on all sides. The moment we were in the open, the noise of the fight assailed us. Bloody hell, I sucked in a sharp breath. I guess Mr. Ambrose was right. There are more bandits. A lot more. They were swarming out of cave openings all along the opposite end of the valley. Dozens of them, hundreds. Opposite them stood our band of fighters, which no longer seemed so insurmountably strong as when they had come swarming down from the hills. From what I could see, we were evenly matched in numbers. Without hesitation, I ducked behind a rock, laid the rifle atop, aimed, and fired. The recoil, which I had hardly noticed the first time, with a thick mass of men right behind me, now almost knocked me off my feet. But I didn't give in. I reloaded and fired again. Not that I knew whether I actually hit someone. I was about as good a shot as Mr. Ambrose was a conversationalist, but I couldn't just sit here and do nothing. Fire. That single word out of Mr. Ambrose's mouth was all the warning I got before the roar I had heard only once before rose up again, straight out of hell. It was just as frightening as last time, only now Mr. Ambrose wasn't here to hold me. Covering my ears, I peered past my rock, to where the 3 sinister guns had been set up, facing towards the entrances of the caves. The bandits in front of them were suddenly falling like flies. Those who somehow, miraculously, hadn't been hit yet, scrambled to get back in, bashing their own comrades over the head if necessary. Glancing from left to right, I saw several of our own men on the ground, their hands stuffed into their ears. Apparently, they hadn't been fully prepared for Mr. Ambrose's little surprise, either. Knowledge is power is time is money, meaning that if I shared knowledge, that would be tantamount to sharing power or money. I snorted, remembering his words. One of these days, I growled, fixing my eyes on Mr. Ambrose's straight, black-clad back, your boarded-up mouth is going to cost you dearly. But then maybe spreading the word about weapons like these wouldn't be a good idea either. Forcing my hands away from my ears, I hurriedly stuffed the edges of my burnous into my ear holes to muffle the torturous noise. Once it was bearable, I picked up my rifle, which had fallen to the ground, and resumed firing. Not that my help appeared to be needed. There was hardly a bandit alive outside the cave anymore. When the last of them finally limped into the darkness, the roar of the gun ceased, and I dared to lower my rifle. Cream, Mr. Ambrose made a gesture to his bodyguard. Most of them went into these 3 big caves. That one, and that one. He pointed them each out in turn. You take 50 men and one of the prototypes and go down the left one. Yusuf will take the right, and I the middle. 10 men stay outside to block up all the smaller exits with explosives. If the stone turns out to be too solid, stand guard outside the exit and shoot anyone who comes out that is not me or one of my commanders. Yes, Sahib. Yes, Effendi. In moments, the well-trained fighters split up into 3 main groups. But those moments were enough for me to slide out from behind my rock and join the middle one. Ready and reporting for duty, sir, I said, giving a mock salute. Mr. Ambrose didn't return it. What are you doing here? His eyes flashed with cold lightning. I told you to stay safe. And I told you I'd be coming with you. A battleground is no proper place for a lady. My eyes narrowed. It's not, is it? No. Well, in that case I'm definitely coming with you. I love improper places. Mr. Ambrose's left little finger twitched, twice, betraying a rolling thunderstorm of emotion inside his stony form. Fine, stay behind me and do as I say. I gave him my demurest smile. Don't I always? Not deeming that worthy of a reply, he turned and headed towards the cave, surrounded by dozens of men bristling with weapons. Passing the prototype gun, he saw that one of the men in charge of it had been shot and lay dead on the ground. A volunteer, he called. We need a volunteer to help carry and fire this. My hand shot up in the air. Not you, I order someone else to volunteer. His glare raked the assembled men. More than 100 hands shot up into the air immediately, and I lowered mine, pouting. You there, he gestured at the lucky winner, and the man hurried towards his assigned post. Motioning forward with his head, Mr. Ambrose led us into the cave. Several of the men pulled out lanterns and lit them without having to be ordered. Orange light flickered on bare, craggy stone walls. Use only the rifles and other guns while we're in here, Mr. Ambrose ordered in a low voice. Not the explosives. We don't know how secure this place is, and we don't want it to come down on us. Muttered, yes, sirs, and yes, Effendis came from all directions. We walked through the dark until we came to a bend in the tunnel. Behind the bend, I could just make out the tunnel splitting off into 2 directions. What now? One of the men whispered. Give me that. Shoving one of the men aside, Mr. Ambrose took hold of his prototype. Without setting it on the ground, he started to turn the handle. Ear-splitting thunder echoed from the cave walls, and the prototype gun spat a lance of fire into the darkness. Other than that, nothing happened. Quickly, Mr. Ambrose swung the gun around to face the other tunnel, and turned the handle again. Once more, thunder split the air, but this time, it was accompanied by a shrill scream from somewhere down the dark passage. Mr. Ambrose lowered the gun, pointing in the direction from which the scream had come. We go that way. And he started forward. The tunnel was long and winding. Every time we reached a bend, Mr. Ambrose gave a silent sign for us to stop. Then, the men with the prototype gun marched forward, held it around the corner and started firing. Almost every time we turned the corner, we came across blood-spattered corpses. After the latest such bloodbath, I turned to Mr. Ambrose and whispered, you say this is a prototype? Still in development? Yes. How much money do you mean to ask of the government for one of these things when it is finished? He gave me a cool look. You don't honestly think I'll be selling a weapon like that to anyone, do you, let alone a government? It's far too powerful a thing for politicians to play with. Why, sir, you almost sound like a man with a conscience. Au contraire, Mr. Linton, I sound like a man who prefers to have the biggest gun himself, instead of giving it away. Well, that was certainly one way of looking at it. Shrugging, he marched over the corpses on the floor, not bothering to step around them. Maybe in 20 years or so, once I have a better model for myself, I'll find a front man and sell these somewhere where the government is not quite as inane as in Great Britain. 29. Finally, we reached the last bend in the tunnel. How did I know it was the last? I couldn't see around it, of course, but we all could hear the bandits' hushed, angry voices, and see the light of torches and lamps flickering on the walls. They were not far ahead, and they had nowhere else to flee to. Has someone got a mirror? Mr. Ambrose asked, his voice almost inaudible. Nobody spoke up. A mirror, anyone? His gaze drifted to me. Don't look at me. Do you think that just because I'm female, I'm carrying mirrors and fans and lace handkerchiefs around with me wherever I go? I snapped. It certainly would come in handy. He let his eyes wander over the rest of us. Anyone? Finally, a cautious hand rose from the back. One of the prettier men in the company apparently did carry a hand mirror around with him wherever he went. So much for gender roles. Hand it over. Mr. Ambrose held out his hand. Taking the mirror from the reluctant dandy, he cautiously slid it around the corner of the tunnel. It barely protruded a few inches past the stone, but suddenly there was a shout, and shots rang out. Idiots, Mr. Ambrose hissed, and pulled back the mirror with a jerk. We heard a strange, harsh ping sound, followed by a scream, and curses. Listen up. Turning towards us, Mr. Ambrose fixed us with those dark eyes of his that seemed even darker and more threatening in the gloom. I got a glimpse around the bend. There's a cave there, fairly round, with all sorts of crates and bags, probably the bandits' plunder. The bandits are scattered throughout the cave. Once we go around the bend, we can't use guns anymore. Not the prototype, not rifles, not even revolvers. The cave is too small. The bullets will ricochet off the walls, and they might be as likely to hit any of us as our enemies. He jerked a thumb towards the cave, from which we still heard curses in Arabic. I think the bandits found that out just now, too, so it'll be one-on-one in there, close combat. Does everyone still have their blade? Shouldering their rifles, the men pulled scimitars, daggers and sabers. Suddenly, the light of the lamps was illuminating a forest of wickedly sharp steel. Good, that's everyone. I cleared my throat, meaningfully. Everyone but one, he amended, and with a glare handed me a small knife from his belt. Is that a joke? I looked at the tiny thing with distaste. That's not big enough to cut my toenails with. Then you must have impressive toenails. Forward. And he charged into the cave. Not waiting to be outdone by one of the men this time, I dashed after him. I slid around the corner, my dagger half raised and ran straight into one of the bandits. And ran into him, I don't just mean we knocked heads. I really mean, ran into him. The tip of my dagger was just about belly high. We collided, and there was strange, wet thud, like a blade being slammed into a soft sheath. Only the sheath was a man's belly. MMPF. Arg. We both toppled over, rolling across the floor, blood streaming over us. For a moment, I didn't know whether it was mine or his, then I felt him twitch under me, caught in his death throes. Above me, I heard yells and the trampling of feet, and I pulled in my head just in time. A boot stomped down where it had been a moment ago. Man after man jumped over me in the rush to storm the cave. I growled. I didn't like men going over my head, whether metaphorically or literally. Woof. A boot hit me in the side, and all the air went out of me. Another boot hit, and other. Ouch. Careful. Live one down here. Another boot hit. This is all your fault. I growled at the man beneath me. Couldn't you have gotten out of my way in time? The corpse stared up at me with glassy eyes, not appearing in the mood to reply. Another boot hit me in the side, this time so hard that I rolled over and came to a stop with the dead bandit on top of me. Yuck. Get off me. I pushed, but nothing happened. The corpse only lifted a few inches, then smacked back down on top of me. That made me angry, really angry. I pushed again, with all my might, and the corpse slid off me and onto the floor, leaving me panting, with a bloodstained dagger clutched in my hands. If only Aunt Brank could see me now. Not too far away, a scream sounded. It tore me from my paralysis. Bloody hell, I had to get off this floor, or I would soon join my friend, the disgusting corpse, in the underworld. Rolling around, I pushed myself to my feet and steadied myself against the cave wall. Quickly, I looked round the cave to see what was happening. It was mayhem, utter and complete mayhem. Throughout the cave, bandits and Mr. Ambrose's men were dueling with daggers, scimitars and sabers. Every now and again, a small explosion would light up the cave, and I knew that someone had thrown an explosive or dropped a lamp. The smells of sweat, blood and burning oil filled the room. Him, over there, get him. My eyes flicked to the origin of Mr. Ambrose's voice. There he was, pointing to a big, bearded man, who, standing atop a ledge, seemed to be commanding the bandits. He was all the way across the cave, too far for Mr. Ambrose or me to reach but not for someone else.